Hello, Nick, and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having us.
Good. So I just wondered if you could start off by telling us a bit about yourself.
So I live in Leeds. I came across here for university and then just sort of stayed afterwards in the general area. For work, I work with my wife who runs a marketing agency, and I'm the director of operations within that, keeping everything ticking. And then outside of that, the sort of probably more interesting side of my life is that I have a amputation of my arm, and I got into physical disability rugby league around 5 years ago. And it's I think the podcast is going to be largely where that's taken me over the last few years, which has been really fantastic journey for me.
Awesome. So I want to start off with kind of childhood, really. Where did you grow up, and what sports did you play, and who were your sporting idols?
So Blackpool is where I was born, so the other side of the Pennines from now. And it's not something that generally goes down with my teammates super well, but I always grew up as a footballer. So being a rugby league player now, I get quite a lot of stick for that. And I tend to get grazes on my legs from where I slide, because I still slide like a footballer, and end up taking the skin off my shin now when I'm scoring tries. I'm recovering from with one now. But yeah, so grew up in Blackpool, played football all the way through my life. When I came to university, I played football to a decent level in the Territorial Army, the reserves as it is now. And I was a fitness instructor with them for about 5 years, 4 of which were post-amputation. So as far as I know, I think I was probably one of the only fitness instructors in the British Army with one arm, because I qualified before and then sort of carried on doing it for a few years, which was like a real learning experience. I had to sort of adapt the way I taught, the way I instructed, the way I demonstrated activities. But it was really useful when you get people that maybe weren't, a 6'5", massive shouldered bloke that had struggled with the assault courses or press ups or anything. It's like, well, if I can manage it with half a right arm, it's technique and practice. It's not all about brawn sometimes. It was really good to be able to instruct loads of different people from different units and different walks of life on how to get fit and how to achieve goals, which I really enjoyed. Yes, that's me up to probably sort of university.
And what were you like as a child? Were you always adventurous and active, always playing sports?
Yeah. So, like I said, football was my main one, and I'd play 12 times a week. I played for a few different teams. I was always quite active. Certainly as I got into like college and things, I started doing a little bit of rugby. I was quite outgoing, and then being in the Army Reserves really like brought that out me and gave me places to test myself and push myself a bit more. Sort of a play to quite a high standard of football within the Territorial Army. We got to sort of the TA Cup final, which was we lost, but it was a great experience to be part of, and the team around that. And that's probably one of my last sort of real organised bits of sport. So I was playing in that with half an arm, and then when I left the TA, I sort of dropped out of organised sport for quite a while until I found physical disability rugby league.
And what position did you play when you played football?
Centre back. So I'm not necessarily the biggest, tallest bloke in the world, and I don't think I necessarily fit the centre back model. At least the teams we played in the Army, I was normally one of the smallest centre backs you'd find. But when I was very young, I was, well, still now I'm quite a quick lad. And when football moved from playing 7-a-side or 8-a-side, whatever it was when you're very young, to playing 11-a-side, and the offside trap comes in, I couldn't score to save my life, and I used to be a forward. So they moved me to defence, and all I had to do was beat their strikers to the ball and kick it off to safety. And it was a revelation to me that everyone thought I was amazing. I don't have to finish. I just need to get there quicker and kick it in literally any direction. And everyone thought I was great. So I sort of developed my skill in that over a few years, and yeah, played to quite a decent standard with it. And it sort of, instead of relying on necessarily height and strength, it was speed and positional awareness and stuff, which I think it's a little bit of a revelation there. As I've just said it probably stood me in really good stead, because that's what my strengths are at rugby now, is my speed and my positional and looking for gaps and looking around the pitch and trying to be in the right place at the right time.
And who do you support in the football?
So I support Manchester United. I was a season ticket holder for 10 years, going back a little bit now. But yeah, again, something I get quite a lot of stick for living in Leeds. Um, um, but yeah, I used to go to all of like the massive games in sort of the heyday of United, so the treble and stuff like that, which always gave me a passion for sport and the passion for being active. So yeah, it was a great time to have a season ticket.
And you mentioned earlier about your arm amputation. So how old were you when that occurred, and what led to your arm being amputated?
So I was 21 and it was a traffic accident. So I was really, really lucky at the time that the friend I was with was actually a medical student. And basically the forearm got just really badly damaged. They tried to sew it back together and couldn't. So eventually had to amputate. But if I hadn't have been with the guy that was my best friend at the time and he kept a cool head, like if he'd have panicked for a little bit, then it would have been a very different story. But he kept his head. He sort of provided me first aid treatment and kept me in a good enough state for the ambulance to get there, and then the doctors in the hospital to do their work. So, losing an arm's not great, but it could have been so much worse. And at the time, I've also got, for the video, I don't know if you can see it, there's a big scar on my knee where that got damaged. And when I woke up in the hospital, I thought I'd still got my arm, still felt normal. I was scratching my leg with the hand. My parents were very upset and telling me it has been amputated, it has gone, it isn't there. And I was like, going, come on now. Like, but it's there. I'm touching my leg. Like, never really seen my dad that upset before. Mum incredibly upset. Probably not a wind up. But then the other voice on the other side of you going, what are you talking about? It's there though. It, like I could feel the fingers on my leg. And so I said, well, let me see it. So my dad lifted up the sheet. Oh, yeah, no, that is not there anymore. And then did another sort of check of my limbs and realized my leg actually wasn't moving right. But all that was it was anesthetized while they put a skin graft on the knee to hold it in place so you didn't bend the knee and lose it. But my parents didn't know about that. And I went, what's wrong with my leg? My dad went out, rugby tackled a nurse and essentially carried her into the room. And I said, what was happening with my leg? Because I thought I'd lost both. And she said it's a medium to large skin graft and a couple of that. Right, cool. But what does that mean? Like, can I walk? And she said, oh yeah, the muscle underneath is damaged and it's going to take a while, a lot of physio, but you'll be able to do anything you could do on it before. And I've never felt relief like it, apart from maybe when I got my England call up. But yeah, because I was into running at the time and football, and they were like, oh, you will be able to, and that relief sort of insulated me from the loss of the arm, because I was like, well, I can still walk. It was sheer terror for about 45 seconds, 30 seconds, for the longest of my life, where, knowing what I know now, I would have adapted, and you make the best of the situation you're in. But at the time, my world was crumbling around my ears in that bed. And when they told me I'd still got two legs, I was like, right, cool. I still play football. I've got a spare arm. It'll be fine. Jobs are good. No dramas. Yeah, so that sort of helped me in the immediate aftermath of the injuries and stuff to cope with the situation.
And were you left or right-handed?
I was right, and it is a nightmare. So I had to get the books you get for like toddlers, where they trace sort of wiggly lines at first to learn to write, and then you do letters. And even now I can't write like I could with my right. It's messier. After about 10 minutes, the hands start to cramp because the muscles didn't develop when I was young. So I think if I did hours every day, I could hammer them into working. But I took a long time I basically got to a plateau with the writing and things, and then I had to decide what I wanted to do. And I spent about 45 minutes every day to get to a level to like move it off this plateau. Right, that's acceptable. We'll call it quits now. And what I did was, because I was only in hospital for 6 days, and I sort of conned my way out by forcing the physios to let me do things that they didn't think I was ready. And I was like, I've been doing it for years. It's fine. I can walk. So they let me out. And then what I'd do is I'd just test different ways of doing things, because I didn't get a prosthetic for about a year, I think, after losing arm, because it took a long time to settle. And you'd go to the appointments and go like, well, it won't really work very well. I was like, well, you're the experts, prosthetists. If you say I should wait, cool, no problem. And then by the time I got one, I'd been living my life. I was back at uni and I'd learned how to do things. And, some of them looked quite awkward from outside, but I'd figure out a technique of doing something, whether it's shoelaces, buttering bread, zipping up a jacket, figure out every way I think I could possibly do it, identify the one that I thought was the easiest or the most likely to work, and then just hammer repetition and practice and practice and practice until I could do anything. And for quite a few years, I was quite proud with it. I wouldn't take any help and assistance with doing things. Whereas now, as I've got a little bit older, I'm a lot more chilled out about it. So I'll ask for help with my shoelaces and things. But still, sort of once every few weeks, I'll just touch base with it and make sure I can do it myself, because I'm quite competitive and quite a proud bloke that I want to know that I can do it for myself. Like, there are certain things that I've just had to write off and like, yeah, that's not happening. Like tying a bow tie, I've had to go with one arm, and I gave up on that. But general day-to-day things, I like knowing that, if my wife wasn't here or there weren't friends about, I wouldn't just be stuck and be having to wander around with my shoelaces untied. Like, there's ways I can do it and stuff.
And what you mentioned, obviously, about you had physio and things like that following your amputation. What sorts of things did the physios do with you, and how long were you having input from physios, following your amputation?
So that did not go very well for me, if I'm absolutely honest. Because I was 21, and I basically got bounced from service to service to service, saying I was part of a young adult team here, and they came around to the house with a physio, a doctor, a nurse, had this big interview. And then a couple of weeks later, I'd get a letter being like, "Oh, you're not right for our service. You've been moved to here." And basically, there aren't many upper limb amputees, and especially there aren't many young upper limb amputees. I actually volunteer for two charities, the Limbless Association and Limb Power, that obviously do a lot of work with amputees, and I've learned statistics through them and things. And it's crazy how small a sort of population we are. So the provision is pretty poor, and it basically led, I have like really bad muscle wastage down sort of the right hand side of my back. And that had pulled my spine sort of out of shape, and I'd get spasms, and that actually affected my life more than not having the hand, because I learned how to do things here, but when my back spasmed completely, it was game over. Like, don't pass go, don't collect 200 quid. You're not doing anything today. But it was the rugby again. I started training, and I got online, and I searched for things. I now have a carbon fiber prosthetic that I use for physio, yoga, like gym work, and we're on version 4 of that now. So with each one, we refine it a little bit, we move a little bit here, we redesign this elbow, and it keeps sort of improving. I've also got this sort of strap that goes across my chest and anchors to underneath my armpit of my stump arm, and I can attach that to a bar so I can deadlift, and that is a game changer for my back. And I can put on like dumbbells or kettlebells onto it to do sort of farmers walks, carrying weight. Because what you see a lot of one-armed athletes that I sort of started following, a lot of them go down the route of doing stuff one arm. So, doing stuff like a clean and press, all one arm all the way up. Whereas for me personally, with the way my back was, when I started doing that, it just exacerbated all the issues and made everything 10 times worse. I needed to be evening up, not exaggerating the strength on my left without doing anything for the right. So, pardon me. So yeah, I didn't have a great time with that. But on the other side of that coin, when I got selected for England and we went into camp for the World Cup, we had a physio, very high level physio, and a sports rehabilitation specialist who were like magicians. They were absolutely amazing. And one of them sort of heads a course at university and brought some of her students across that gave us all treatments. And they were absolute groundbreaking. I've got my own physio now that helps me, but I'd never had one. I never had treatment sort of immediately before or after games and stuff. And I'd underestimated quite how much of a difference that makes, because it was mind blowing how from the state, like I had an injury for most of the World Cup, but they'd get straight into it, and it kept me going. It took a few weeks afterwards for me to be all right, but all you want is to be able to play those games and do your best in them and do your best for your team. And they did that for us, and it was outstanding.
But as a physio, obviously, it's great to hear, the impacts that, some good physios have obviously had in hopefully, helping you to,
they really have.
maintain and be able to do the things you enjoy. So that's really good to hear. You mentioned earlier about being in the Territorial Army. How old were you when you joined them?
So good question. Just after I came to uni, so 19. So I joined, and it was a unit that was specially designed for students. So gave you a little bit of taste of the army to maybe encourage you to join later, but also just to sort of give you a bit of a favourable look at it. So, you know, future leaders of tomorrow that have been to university or whatever, if they joined this unit, they might look a bit more favourably on, you know, ex-servicemen or anything like that. And I loved it. I'd got no intention of joining the army before I went to it, but I had a few friends that joined, and you know, they got paid to go away, do stuff that I would have paid to do, and had a really good time. So I joined it, and if it wasn't for my arm, I was fully planning on joining the regular army. It was all I wanted to do. I should have actually been on a quite high level fitness selection for the parachute regiment the week I was in hospital doing my arm. Obviously never attended that, but it was all I wanted to do, and that was one of the big things about losing my arm. That was the main, at the time, thing that changed was, well, I can't go through selection to join the army. That's off now. I stayed with my unit for 4 years afterwards, and loved every moment of it, and trained people that went on tours, went into regular service, and almost all of my close friends outside of rugby are from that time and are in the army and things like that. So it was great, and the opportunities I got within it. You know, I learned to ski with the unit before I had an arm, and then before I lost my arm, and then we went away and we had army instructors, and they taught me how to ski without my arm, which people might not think you need arms to ski, but it is quite helpful when you do the more challenging stuff. So yeah, I love that. I love that period in my life, and I think it set me up well to deal with the loss and the coming out. And I was a fitness instructor. I was in charge of, well, when I first lost my arm, I was just a fitness instructor in the unit, but within about a year, I was in charge of the fitness for all of the regiment. So I'd be stood in front of sort of 150 people, briefing them, taking them on marches, assault courses. There was always a very funny game of every now and again you'd get some new recruit and you'd brief them, oh, this is an 8-foot wall, it's an individual obstacle. I'll teach you the 3 techniques that we teach to get over it. By the end of this training, you'll be able to achieve that. So, but you can't, staff. It's like, okay, fella, come here, come out to the front. Like, right, so what we'll do here is I'll make sure my staff cover this for you, and you can practice as much as you want for the whole time we're here. But before we leave this camp at the end of the weekend or the training cycle or whatever, me and you are going to race. And if I beat you, I will buy you a crate of beer when we get back to our unit's bar. The other way around, you just owe me a pint. If you lose, you just owe me a pint. And very few people ever took the bet, because the lads around that knew me and the girls as well were like, go on, because I'd gone out and I'd hammered these walls and made sure that I knew the technique and that I could get over them quickly, because I didn't want to stand in front of people and be telling them to do stuff that I couldn't do. It was something that I really prided myself on, and I think there was only one person that ever took the bet and ended up being a really close mate, because he was a really, really good lad and knew how to have a laugh. But he lost. But yeah, so it was a really good time, and it gave me so much like confidence and self-worth within my disability, because it did take extra effort. It was harder, but I could do it and I could keep pace. Like when we go away on a training weekends, just the physical training instructors, I wasn't at the top of the class because some of those lads were animals and were so fit, so true. But I was up there. Like I was in sort of, you know, top half, top third. I was competitive. I wasn't sort of a pat on the head, sort of diversity high or whatever you want to say, just at the back. Oh yeah, just keep him going. Like I was good at my job, and I was physically capable. So that was something that was really, really important to me.
It sounds like you obviously really enjoyed your time with the TA, and so following your arm amputation, was the decision to not continue with the army, was that your own decision, or was that something that the army were kind of like, well, because of your amputation, there are elements of the job you couldn't do, and did you, if so, did you agree with that decision, or do you feel you could have joined the army and adapted?
So I knew I could never join regular, as much as I might in my head have thought I was more competent than some people that did go. But what I wanted to do was carry on in my role, and my unit were fantastic. The commanding officer at the time was amazing. They came into hospital and he said, you can have 3 options. You can be a social member of the unit, just, come to the dinner nights. The bar's always open to you. Whenever you want to be there, you can come. You can carry on being, I was going to be a section commander. So basically every year we'd have intakes and train them up, and we staff that as sort of section commanders, platoon commanders, things like that. You can go back and do that, or you can focus more on, I'd already got my qualification a few weeks before I lost my arm. And actually the medic said if I hadn't been so fit at the time, it might have been a different story with my arm, because my body was able to cope with the blood loss because I was in really good shape. He said you can carry on with doing what you would have done with that. And I was like, fitness instructor, third option. I'll take that. I'll come back. I'll do that. And I did. And the unit were really supportive. I went and worked with all kinds of different units in infantry, artillery, signals, because there weren't enough fitness instructors basically. So I went out and did training with all of them. But then when it came to it, when my qualification needed renewal and all you needed to do was go on a weekend to check you're filling out your risk assessments correctly, I was barred from doing that by a very senior part of the army. And my commanding officer fought it, and we tried. And the only justification we could get is because I couldn't do monkey bars, which I didn't necessarily think meant that I couldn't be a fitness instructor. I could still pass the mandatory fitness test, which were 44 press-ups in 2 minutes. Yeah. I had to have a prosthetic, but I could still get my forearms into position I needed to, fully extend. There was no mechanical assistance. I could pass everything. And there were units, there was a medical regiment that I'd worked with that were like, we will sign anything you want. We will help you get across here. They were all like civilian doctors, but I couldn't pass the medical you required to do a transfer anywhere. And it just, we tried, and I wanted to stay. And there was a lot of fear from much higher echelons of the army than I ever came near to, that other people could use me as an example and be like, well, you can't get rid of me because I can do what he's doing, even if they've lost an arm. And, you know, I wasn't deployable. I couldn't have gone on tour, and the army needs deployable soldiers. So it is what it is. And at the time I was quite frustrated. But I had a fantastic time there. And looking back on it now, I'm glad I had that time. I wish it had carried on for a bit longer. When I left, it actually, within about a year, I crumbled because all of my self-worth and confidence had been tied up in this role of being a senior fitness instructor. And when I lost that and was just going back to a postgraduate course, that wasn't what made me who I was and gave me my self-worth and my confidence. And so, yeah, I had a really, really bad time for a few years afterwards with mental health and things. And then finding rugby league is what started me back on a better path to feeling more confident, feeling more like myself. So, yeah.
So how long ago was it that you left the TA, and like you say, you were doing a post-grad and you went through a sort of challenging time in your mental health? So roughly what time was that? And then what year did you first come across physical disability rugby league?
So I can answer one of those easily. So disability rugby league was about 5 years ago. Lost my arm, 15. So it'd probably be about 10 years ago-ish when I left the Territorial Army, give or take. So I had probably, 3 or 4 years between that and then starting rugby league. And that wasn't necessarily the greatest time in my life. It wasn't all terrible, but my mental health wasn't great, and I was quite depressed, and I had treatment for it and counselling and things, and it took quite a while to sort of feel better in myself. And it was when I was already on sort of a slightly better path when I found disability rugby league, but that really helped lift me, because what I hadn't realised is how integral being part of a team, my fitness, being competitive were to. Now I have that insight, but at the time I'd stopped playing competitive sport. I did kickabouts with the lads after work, but nothing to the level I used to. And I hadn't realised how much of my life is underpinned by being involved in competitive sport, because it's sort of the linchpin for me. It's like cornerstone. If I'm ever feeling low, like in the off season, I'm not feeling great, and it's because I've had a chest infection. I've not been to the gym in like 2 weeks. It's like, right, let's go and do something that I can. And it is, different people have different things that help them. And for me, sport and activity is by far my most important one.
And how did you first come across physical disability rugby league?
So it was an England player's sister. So a lad that I'm playing England team with now. I worked with his sister, and he played for Leeds Rhinos and had sort of seen me around and got his sister to start mentioning it to me. And I had a little bit of rugby experience, not much. I played a little in college, but that was union. I'd never played league. And I was like, no, it's not for me. I'm not bothered about it. I'll just carry on playing bits of football. And she basically nagged at me and pecked at me because I was sort of getting a bit fitter then and was sort of compared to the blokes I work with, probably in decent shape. And she kept saying, oh, right, fine. And one day I just snapped, I sent an email, and I got this big convoluted plan in my head that, I'll write myself a proper program and I'll spend a month, 6 weeks, like polishing my fitness, getting a really good state, go down, see what it's all about. Because I thought this email, there'd be you've got to come down, maybe have a medical, come and chat to us. There'd be, and Emma was like, there's training tomorrow, come down. I was like, right, not what the plan was. Like, all right, we'll go down, we'll just see what the training's about. We can gauge where the fitness levels are and stuff. And then we'll go back to plan A. The fitness plan, maybe we don't go for a couple of weeks while we work on ourselves before we go. Got down there and loved it. From the first second I was there, I was in hook, line, and sinker, and they got their second ever game in 4 days' time. Like, do you want to play? I was like, right, well, I've enjoyed this bit of training, but I knew the fundamental rules of rugby league. 6 tackles, don't pass forward, how you tackle someone, but any nuances, I had no idea. Like, I'd not really ever watched it. I was like, oh, okay, yep, fine, let's go for it. Like, I've never want to. If someone puts a challenge in front of me, I'm not one to back down from it. I would just try to avoid that challenge sort of happening at that time. So played my first game again, absolutely loved it. I came off injured after about 20 minutes, and then begged and pleaded with the coaches and the med staff that were there to let me back on, because basically I'd just really badly damaged some muscle, like my muscles in sort of my neck and my shoulder from going down a tackle, getting kneed in the side of the head, and it all just really hurt. Yeah, it wasn't great, but there are roles within physical disability rugby league of non-contact players. So you just tackle with a touch, and they get tackled with a touch, and they wear red shorts that defines them as non-contact. So I was begging them, please let me go back on, please let me go back on. And one of them was like, well, if you can lift your arm up to your shoulder, we'll let you on. And so I tried to lift it up. I was like, in quite a lot of pain, but smashed some paracetamol down and managed to talk him into letting me go on, because I was head over heels with it. I just wanted to play every minute. And I went back on and I had a great game. I got given man of the match after my first ever game, and barely knew what was going on for a lot of it, but ran as hard as I could, as quick as I could, and did what the lads that knew more around me told me when they shouted at me. And then for my second training, at my first training, one of our biggest players, who's one of my best mates in the team now, it's big, 6 foot odd, big broad-shouldered lad. I went into tackling him. I got no idea how I was going to bring him down. Ran at him as hard as I possibly could, stump out straight into his middle, and I actually broke his rib.
Cool.
2 of his ribs, I think, is which I still like reminding him of. And come to my second training, and the coaches called me over for a chat, and I was like, oh no, they're gonna say I went too hard. I hadn't meant to do it. It was the exuberance and tried to make a tackle. And I was panicking, and they started off a really sort of bit of awkward conversation. We just wanted to ask you something and see what you thought. And I was going to say, like, oh, they're going to say that the disability sport isn't for me because I've hammered someone, and like we chatted and we were fine, and he was laughing and joking about it. I was like, oh god! And they actually asked me to be captain, which was a real roller coaster of like a 30-second conversation where I thought I was about to get booted from the team. So I was honoured to become captain and have been since. So yeah, the start and the pickup rate for me within PDRL was massive. So I was right at the start of the sport as well. I missed 1 game, and that's the only game I've ever missed. And because the sport in this country started about 3 weeks before I got involved. So yeah, it's been there for the whole time, and I couldn't be more glad that it's Castleford Tigers that I started with and I'm honoured to be captain of. It's been absolutely fantastic all the way through.
And so when you play, I think from what you were saying there about the tackle, it sounds like you don't play with your prosthetic on your right arm. Is that right?
Yeah, so quite a lot of people ask me questions about that, and it would be a game changer if I was allowed to wear that on a pitch. I mean, I don't know many of the other team would be still walking after it because it's a big carbon fiber steel
That's
piece of
true.
equipment. It wouldn't be great for player safety, but my team would be all right. But yeah, no, so that's just for training and stuff. So all I play with is I wear a sleeve on my arm, which is basically it helps control the sensation I have in it and sort of normalizes the nerves in it a bit and keeps it warm because it gets quite cold. Uh, I've tried with different ones with bits of grip on the stump as well to like help hold the ball and things, but they've never really worked that well. So yeah, I just play as I am, full contact, and tackling isn't necessarily my strongest suit, but I just sort of go in with everything I've got and hope that the bloke doesn't carry on going.
I was going to say, obviously, for anyone who's played rugby, when you tackle, you generally the technique is to try and sort of wrap both arms round, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you only have, one full arm, do you adjust yourself to tackle?
Um, with a degree of commitment. It's just sort of go in. So I'm quite a quick player. I've got decent footwork, so I can sort of move around and make sure I'm in the right position in front. And it's just stick my shoulders in as hard as I can and try and wrap as much as I can. I've actually been talking to my England head coach and my Castleford head coach about possibly trying a new technique where I lead with my different shoulder and I hook around to a thigh a little bit more and try and do different things. Like in general, I tend to try and hit quite high and bear hug the player to lock the ball up so that they can't then offload the ball, and that doesn't necessarily bring them down, but I basically run into them chest to chest as hard as I can to take the momentum off, and then just hug them so that they can't pass the ball, and then a teammate. So I'll tend to get paired with someone who's a really reasonably good tackler on my right hand side. So my centre for England or for Castleford knows that we work together like that. So I'll hit them and take all the momentum off. They come in and chop their legs to bring them down, and that's a lot around PDRL is working to your disabilities, knowing what your teams are, what the strengths, what the weaknesses are, making sure they're in the right place. So, for instance, I only play on the left wing now. When I first started, I just marauded all over the pitch. I wanted the ball and I loved it, and I was just very excitable. But for me to catch, if it's coming from my left hand side across my good arm, I've got to stop, turn my chest to the ball to be able to catch it.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's coming in across my stump, it comes into my arm like a basket. So I can take that a full sprint, catch it, and carry on. So it's a no-brainer for me to be on the left wing now because I'm much more capable in attack, and attacking is the strength of my game, like fast and good footwork. My job as a winger is to score tries. So the that's something that over time we worked out, and it is as all players you have to understand the disability and make sure you're working to their strengths, and especially sort of at England at the international level, that we're covering their weaknesses, because everyone has weaknesses. Like you wouldn't want to put a bloke that had got half a right arm next to me, because all the other team's going to do is try and hit that gap between us all day long. So it's about, and you can make your weaknesses strengths as well by the way you deploy people and stuff like that. So there's got a lot of nuances to it, and with the non-contact players, where you have them on the pitch and how they can do stuff, so that they're not necessarily going to score many because it's quite easy to tackle them. But in defence, the non-contact players are absolute game changers because they can get around, make the tackles. You can maybe have a breather for a bit,
Yep.
and then pick back up in attack. So I'm really proud of being part of a sport that's so welcoming and diverse. Like there is no condescending, there's no pat on the head. Like the guys in the red shorts and non-contact tend to be the most disabled players, and if it was just a straight non-contact game, they wouldn't be able to compete at that level, given the sort of severity of their disability. But because of the way the rules are adapted slightly, they're game changers. Like they have a huge impact on the game. Like the more so than necessarily any individual contact player. Like they're real key team members.
I think it's interesting what you say. So I play visually impaired rugby, and all of the guys I play with, our sights all vary slightly. So for me, I have tunnel vision. For some of the guys, they'll have good peripheral vision, but no central vision. One of our players, I think he's only got sight in his right eye, so a bit like you, he likes playing on the left wing because
Yep,
for him, obviously, it's
you can see it coming.
for
Yeah,
him, it's just his vision, and that's why it's easy for him. So it's interesting, isn't it, how in disability sports, communication and understanding your teammates is probably more important than kind of in non-disabled sports. So
yeah,
it's but I think it's good to have that communication and that understanding because you then figure out what positions are best for people
yeah,
on the pitch.
absolutely.
I just wondered if you can briefly describe the rules of
Yeah,
physical
of course.
rugby league for anyone
Yeah.
listening who hasn't seen the game.
So there are a few slight differences between domestic and international, but I'll do domestic first. So that's 9 players on the pitch, and you can have a maximum of 2 non-contact red short players. Domestically, the game is open to anyone that thinks they have a disability and are ambulatory. So if you can't walk, there's wheelchair rugby for you. But if you can play PDRL. So that's like women, kids, everything. There's the way the game's constructed is welcome to all of them. We play 10 meters in from either side on the pitch because there's only 9, so that it's not just a massive space everywhere. So it's a slightly narrower pitch, but full length. We play 2 25-minute games once a month, with a gap in between as well. We all the teams meet together, and for a sort of a festival, and that build into a league with the results. And that's also a good adaptation because a lot of people's disabilities, they can't play sort of an 80-minute game. They would be just not capable of it and not capable the next day and things like that. So there's that side of it where the games are shorter, and there's some quite like nuanced rules and things. But for instance, at the breakdown in normal rugby league, as soon as the ball gets played back, the opposition can move forward and try and tackle you. Whereas in my version, the player gathering the ball is allowed to get it up into their hands, and you're not allowed to go after them until they step off or they pass it. So for instance, for me, if I was struggling to pick it up, I've got that little bit of time. I don't need to be scrabbling. For the guys that have cerebral palsy, that's quite a good example. A lot of them get the ball and roll it up their leg. And so they can roll it all the way up, they can get it into their chest, and they can get a pass. Whereas if you were allowed to go and sack them the second the ball was rolled, they wouldn't be able to be there and they'd just get hammered. So there's quite a few things like that are just little rule changes. So for instance, a knock-on you don't hand the ball over, it just counts as a tackle. So for the guys with dexterity issues, or we in domestic, people with sight or hearing issues can play with us as well. So if they drop the ball for any reason, it's just you go back to where it was dropped, and that's your third tackle, your fourth tackle, or whatever. Which means there's no one getting upset they've let the team down because they've dropped it. You can still try and play some fancy rugby because a knock on, it doesn't matter. You can just carry on playing. Whereas when you get to international, it's a little bit more sort of edgier. The rules, as the protections are a little bit less and things like that. And you play with 11 on a full width pitch. And at international, there's the Paralympic classification systems used. So there's certain disabilities that play at domestic that can't, but because the way England have approached it at domestic level is, if you're disabled, come and play, regardless of what it is. So there are some people with sort of very mild disabilities, some people with very severe disabilities. But it means that we could get the game off the floor, because if you put it straight at the Paralympic classification level, when they were trying to launch this sport, there would have been 6 blokes from across the entire 62 turning up trying to play a game. So you need to have that inclusion. And I'm really proud of getting people that thought they'd never be able to play rugby league. Like there's a lad in our team that we constructed a play specifically to get him in to score at the Weldon Road end, which is the sort of the home fans, like holy grail end of the jungle or stadium. And he's watched Castleford play there all his life. He never thought he'd step foot on that pitch, let alone be scoring at his end, where he's been watching one from for whatever 15 years. And it means so much. Like the same in England, we constructed an opportunity, and it's one of my proudest moments in the game, is getting one of the red short lads in for a try. So, like I said, they're really crucial, but it's rare that they could ever score. And they earn it; they deserve to get on the score sheet. But you can't, it's hard for them to get there without getting touched. So we as a team constructed a place. Like I made a break, we got through, got him to come with me, and made sure he got the ball and could get down so he can go back to his mates and his work and say he scored. Because it's one thing being like, oh, I was a really big part of the team. I was really influential, but it's not the same as being able to say you scored. And
Absolutely.
it's really great to be able to play with a bunch of lads that we can do that, and that you can get them what they deserve as well, and that opportunity to score.
And as you mentioned earlier, you started playing the game about 5 years ago. So how has your rugby league career progressed from there?
In a way that I could never have imagined. So when we started playing, I thought it'd be great to represent Cass, pull on the shirt. We play at stadiums and stuff, and it's phenomenal. We played in front of crowds, at halftime, and that was something that I never thought I'd have again after losing my arm and things. And then what would it be now? Maybe 3 years ago, they started be mentioning of internationals and an England team maybe, and at one point I thought that I probably wouldn't come until I'd finished playing. And then it started to crystallize more, and there was more chat about it, and it became more of a real possibility. And then COVID happened and the World Cup. So we played sort of a parallel to the men's, women's, and wheelchair. All of those events got pushed back a year. It's like, right, is this going to happen now? Is ours going to fall by the wayside because it's not as sort of as big a priority as the others to the organisers and things. And when we got the go ahead and sort of two teams dropped out, there was going to be Ireland and Scotland, and they couldn't get teams together because they couldn't get enough players that fit the criteria. And you have to have the sort of A, B, and C, and you have to have certain numbers of each on the pitch. And they just couldn't find the players. And it's, is this all going to fall by the wayside? And the 4 teams that played were Wales, England, Australia, and New Zealand. It's like, well, are the Australian New Zealanders going to come across now when it's only 2 teams here? Or would they rather stay across there, not spend I don't even know what the figure would be, tens of thousands of pounds to bring squads across? So, but it didn't. And the guys working behind the scenes at the RFL, the Rugby World Cup, everything like that, the England staff all pulled it together, and it happened, and it gave us a chance to represent our country. And there's so much I've learned from rugby league. Like I thought I was competitive before, but there was, in the run up to the playing squad being announced for the World Cup, a 20-man squad, we had one game that was England against sort of an all-star group. So some players that didn't medically qualify, things like that, just to have a contact game. And that was the final phase of selection. So I've sort of been in the England wider squad the whole time. Thought I've had a good season. Castleford had won, been on a 9-game winning streak. I've captained that. I've scored against sort of every team, and was thinking I was doing pretty well. And when the team got announced, I was put in the All-Stars team, and I'm a very black and white person. And sort of my wife and my friends and even the coaches were saying, you'll get more game time on that, and I just want to see you. We want to see you in a few different positions and stuff like that. And I heard none of that. What I saw was my dream falling through my fingertips, and it was going. I wasn't an England player anymore, and that's so. For the week between that being announced and playing, I had a real interesting week where I was down, I was up, I was like, well, what do I need to do? And what came through it for me was like stuff like England shirts aren't given, they're earned, and the coaches, I wasn't on their team sheet as far as I was concerned. So that was international, you play 50 minutes. So I'd got a 50-minute game to prove that I deserved an England shirt. And I've been in sort of cup finals and big games before, and I've never felt like the way I did with that. It unlocked something inside me. I've been working for it for 2-3 years since it was first announced, and it had been driving me forward. And I thought I had done enough. If I'm being absolutely honest, I was thinking, we'll be all right here. And then the dream was going up in smoke. So I was lucky enough to be on a team with some of my fellow cast players, and you always hear the expression like, he just wanted it more than the other person, when people score and things. And I'd always thought that was rubbish, especially when you talk about professional athletes, when you commentary on TV, like they want it just as much as anyone. Like, they've trained their entire lives for this. They've only got to that position because they're ultra competitive individuals. But when I think it was in about the first 10 minutes, when one of my players put a kick through for me to chase as like a little grubber to go and score, I had to get past 3 lads in the England team, and I wanted it more than them. You could have put a solid brick wall between me. I went straight through them like they weren't even there. And they were strong, good lads. But it was a gift, really, that experience and having that. And I'm really, really thankful for it because it taught me something about myself. And then, like I had a good game. I scored another try, and in a sort of something that I felt was really weird at the time, because I'm a winger, they also wanted to try me at prop, which for anyone that knows about rugby, you don't really normally get much crossover between props and wingers. Wingers being the small, quick lads, props being the much bigger, sort of big lads in the centre. But the teams that they've been looking about, a lot of the big lads in the centre for the international opposition weren't necessarily that agile and that mobile. So I am quite strong as a runner. So what they were thinking is, especially after sort of 10 minutes, if they'd got a little bit tired, you bring me on in a more central role, and with my speed and sort of dynamism at changing pace, they probably wouldn't be able to handle me. Which I have played as an international prop for a little bit of the World Cup. So that's something that I take the mick out with the lads when I get back to my club. That the guys are 6'4" and weigh double me. I'll be like, as an international prop, lads, I'll tell you, and I don't know how to be a prop. I know nothing about it. Just run hard and straight. But yeah, there's a lot of fun in games, and sort of being at that level tests a lot about you. And you're playing with guys that you haven't spent as much time with, you don't know as well. So you've got to build those bonds, and you've got to muck in together. And the experience of it was absolutely phenomenal.
And obviously, you then went on to earn your place in the England squad, and then obviously the World Cup took place last year. Am I right in thinking it was the Halliwell Stadium? Is that Warrington? Am I correct?
That's where the final was. Yeah. So the group games were played at Victoria Park, which is Warrington Wolves training facility, which has got like lovely, nice stand, a really nice pitch and stuff. And the first game and the final were televised on BBC through their sort of like red button type stuff. So yeah, we went there. We stayed in an absolutely gleaming hotel for sort of the 10 days. Like I mentioned earlier, we're normally used to playing for sort of 50 minutes once a month, and it was 4 games in 9 days, which was savage. It was an absolute challenge. I was putting it sort of 50-50 whether I'd be fit by the end of it. I wasn't expecting there to be a full squad by any means by the end of it. Just common sense dictated that you'd have a third half of us injured. Gotta be. But part of the reason I was raving about the physio so much was, we had a pool and a jacuzzi and hot tubs and these absolutely outstanding medical staff that worked on us every day. Yeah, brought their students in. So we went across to university in Liverpool, and Hope University in Liverpool, and the entire team got massages at once from all of the students there on one of our rest days. And it was a complete game changer. And it's testament to them that every player in the squad was fit for selection for the final. And there were people injured through it. I was carrying injury the whole time, but the attention we got from them and the way the staff sort of changed training for certain people and adapted it so we weren't going hard, because we didn't have recovery time. And you still want to be training and going through different tactics for the next game, but you can't go hard when you've got a 24-hour turnaround. Like you just can't. Even not for one of the things we were talking about. It's like, you don't expect this of the men's, like, first team players. They don't play this often. We're all disabled. Like, come on, fellas. But it worked. Like, I'd like to think by the time the next World Cup comes around and there'll be more teams involved, it will be spread over a little bit more, because although we got out there and we showed what we can do, and I think anyone that watched we'll see the level of rugby that we play is higher than people expect, and it is like a good product. It'd be better if we had rests, like the level of entertainment we could provide, the quality. So, but it was an inaugural one, and you learn lessons, like having chatted with the guys from the World Cup, the wheelchair team that won their World Cup. What they said their first World Cups were chaos. Like they had to go through loads, and as long as we learn lessons and we keep growing the sport, we get more people involved, and we make it better each time we can. That's the dream for me.
But well, you're right. I think normally, in a Rugby World Cup or even, just domestic like Premiership rugby, for example, you normally have a week in between games, don't you?
Yeah.
Because the toll, game of contact rugby takes on the body. As you mentioned earlier, obviously there were 4 teams in the World Cup, so England, Australia, New Zealand, and Wales. So how did the group stage go?
Pretty well for us. We knew we were a strong team. There were bits of footage from Australia and New Zealand that we could find. Most of it was a little bit old, but we'd watched everything we could. Adam Hills, the comedian, plays for Australia and plays domestically for Warrington Wolves. So we knew a little bit there. And actually the head coach, Sean Briscoe, ex-England international, had tried to talk him into playing for England because he does qualify for it, but he wanted to represent Australia. So we played our first game, and it was 56-6 against Australia. Sorry, I think 58-6. I scored a couple of tries. It was a really good day at work. The whole experience of it, you don't know what it's going to feel like to be stood there singing the anthem with your shirt on. Because even though I said we had a warm-up game, they weren't played in England shirts, and it was a friendly. There weren't anthems. It was the first ever England game. Was the first game of a World Cup. So normally you're eased into your competitive sort of level and you have a bit of time, but that was it. We were thrown in, and regardless of what we'd watched online or what we knew, you still don't know. Like, well, what if they have got 3 or 4 lads that weren't in that footage from 2 years ago that are absolute beasts on the pitch, that are wizards with the ball or whatever? But we had a very simple plan of how we wanted to play. The coaches were very clear with it. We didn't overcomplicate it with the type of players that we had. It was simple rugby played well because we'd been selected because we were all good rugby players. So we were thinking we don't need to overcomplicate it. We just need to trust each other's ability and follow these simple steps. And the game plan worked. It worked blindingly. We had a really great day. Wales was a bit more challenging. They had a few players from our league, and they'd recruited from sort of the union side in union sort of game in Wales. And that was more of a tough game. But again, we came out with the win, and that's 32-6. So still a good win. But I think the score, well, not flat as us, we worked hard for it, but they were a much more challenging team. It was a much tougher game. And then New Zealand was a very, very funny one with the hacker, because we had no idea what we were supposed to be doing. So you obviously want to be respectful, like it's a huge thing. And it was funny that I'd bought tickets before our World Cup had been moved and had been announced and things, as a bucket list item to go and watch the hacker being done. Like, seeing it in person was something, lifetime ambition. And I should have been at the New Zealand game that day watching the hacker from the stands. I had tickets, but instead I was, and that's in the men's game. So in the men's World Cup, instead I was on the pitch wearing an England shirt, having the hacker, I don't know what the correct term is, presented to me, done at us, whatever but yeah, witnessing it as an opposition, and it was phenomenal. Like, the guys gave it everything. But then you come to the end of it, and we didn't really know what the score was with when do you walk off, because you absolutely don't want to be disrespectful. That was a very key thing to us. But they just stand there, and they just stand there, and then occasionally they give like another shout and another move. And I was stood next to our captain, and I'm like, should we go yet? Like, we've been a while. Like, how long are we? And we didn't know, and we ended up standing there for quite a while. And then eventually, because what we found out later is they don't move until their captain moves, and their captain won't move until we break. So from the other side, it probably looked like we were trying to sort of play mind games and stand them down. And I think that's what they thought. So, it played out well for us. But we were just trying to do. We didn't want to back down, and we didn't want to sort of show that we were afraid or anything. But we didn't want to be disrespectful. It was a bit of an odd scenario to go through. We knew a bit more because we played them again in the final. We knew a bit more how to do it. So you stay for a certain amount of time and then you break. And especially because the final was on TV, I don't think they'd have appreciated us standing there for sort of a solid 10 minutes while the camera crew were trying to record it. But yeah, it was so New Zealand. We had a really tough game, a really really big game, and then it was only I think a 2-day turnaround before we played them again. We beat them in the group stage by again quite a few points, but they knew they were going to be in the final at that point, so we weren't sure how much they were holding back and what was going on. So you're stepping out into a World Cup final, even though you played them a couple of days earlier. There's still the nerves there. You don't know, because we knew one of their big fellas was injured. It's like, well, what's he going to come on and be like? Is he going to be a handful for us? And he was, and we handled him, and like we won a World Cup final, played in the Halliwell Jones on TV, and that's what to me is really important. Is it's all well and good us winning things, and I'll be proud of that for the rest of my life, and all the lads will. But there's no point in us winning stuff if people don't know and people don't hear about it. To drive engagement in the sport, like the whole sort of legacy that we should have is more people playing. So as much as I want to represent my country for as long as I possibly can, and I want to make it to the next World Cup in 3 years' time, if I can't possibly get in that England team because we've widened the sport and there's so many more people playing, that I'll be like 38 then, or be competing, 38, 39. I'd be competing against, a load of 20-year-olds that are just quicker, stronger, have been playing rugby longer than me, whatever. As much as they'll have to rip that shirt out of my hands, and I will fight tooth and nail to keep my place in or get my place back in the squad, because we're all bets are off now. It's another training phase. It would warm my heart to have grown the sport to that, because it's done so much for me. And every player's the same. Everyone's got a story. Like, it might not be that it helped left them out of depression, but it's been a positive force in every player's life. And especially for people with a disability, I just think it's so powerful and so positive that the more people can get involved, if they've never played rugby, if they've got no interest in it, go to a training and you won't regret it. Because even if it's just being around the lads and the girls and having a laugh, because there's something about it being a disability sport. Because I played able-bodied sport up until this, and you always get people that are really well-intentioned but are awkward, and they don't know whether to tackle you properly. Like, now I play up to it loads. Like if I go play football with a new group of people, like, oh no, you shouldn't be tackling me full on. No, you take it easy. It's like, he plays rugby. Shut up. And someone will put me back in my place that knows me. But you get people and they just feel a bit awkward and they're not certain, which means you don't have the same experience. And it's not through malice or anything like that. It's through wanting to do the right thing and not wanting to be wrong. But when you're at a specific disability environment, everything's taken in stride much more, and you can take them. Like when I drop the ball because I'm one-handed, I get roasted for it. Like there's no like, and we have jokes back and forth. The same with like a lad with one leg falls over. Like if you're in a conventional team, there's gasps and there's people not knowing how to react. Whereas there's people having a laugh and joke about it, and because we've all got disabilities, like no one gets offended. You know where the line is. You can still have that camaraderie and that banter that is harder to have as a disability player in a conventional team, and it's so fantastic. Like it just means the world to me, both with Castleford and the lads and girls that I play with there, and the England team. It's everything. It really is.
And I was chatting to Lewis King on the last episode, who plays for the England Wheelchair Rugby League side, and he was obviously saying about the positive impact that their coverage at the World Cup and winning the World Cup has obviously had on their game at the UK. So have you noticed since you guys have won the World Cup and it was obviously some of the games were broadcast on BBC and things, has that had a positive impact in terms of new players coming along to try the game?
Yeah, it definitely has. So at Castleford, we've had a few new players. We've had more interest. little bits, it helps with things like sponsors as well. The teams always need, like, it costs money to run these teams, and the Super League team supporters and stuff, but it means you can do more. So there's a bit more interest from sponsors, more players coming down. And what we want is for it to snowball. So, and get bigger and bigger. So this year, there are 3 new teams that have joined the league. And I don't know whether they would have been able to get enough players without the World Cup, but I'm sure it helped them, like it's helped us get players, because the England players are spread amongst most of the teams as well. So those teams then put out bits of media coverage about each of us. You know, we sort of get championed a bit within our teams as the sort of figureheads. And like, I would never have been asked to come on a podcast like this. I've done a couple of others, and it's, especially with rugby league, it's a little bit of a bubble. It's not the widest known about sport in the world, and we're a little bit within it. So trying to get as many rugby league fans to know about us is important, and then trying to reach out into non-traditional rugby league groups and demographics and things like that, so that they come down and have a try. And I've chatted to Lewis before. I've met him at a few events and things. And for PDRL, what we see is basically they've blazed a trail that we want to follow. Like, it's taken them a long time to get to where they are, to be getting all of this coverage. The game's fantastic. Like, I went to several of them. I watched them win their World Cup final, and it's awesome to watch. But, you know, going back a few years, no one had heard of them. And so what we basically want to do is try and do what they did, just in a shorter time scale, like learn the lessons that they did and sort of piggyback off their success. And, you know, one of the things I'm really proud of in rugby league is you can walk down a street and point at any person and they can play rugby league, whether it's veterans, whether it's tag, whether it's women's, whether it's physical disability, learning disability rugby league, wheelchair rugby league. There isn't a person that you could walk past on the street that couldn't find a home in rugby league if they wanted to try. Age specific, sex, children, nothing. There's something for everyone. So there's no bar to playing. And so for me, it's the most inclusive sport that I've ever come across that has all of those offerings. Because, you know, a lot of sports have a couple of them, but literally everything for rugby league, there's a home for you everywhere. So the more people hear about all of the variants and see how good the women's game are, like the women's player are and the women's game is, because it's, at the minute, we were attracting players through like word of mouth. So like I was, like a friend or a relative was like, have you heard of this? You should go and have a look. And we want to get past that, like the women's has now. That's on TV, people see it, and it gets more people in. So like if you know someone that's disabled, mention this to them. Like, say, have you thought about it? Reach out to one of the players on Instagram. Like, it's not that hard to find us. Like, I'm Who Needs Two Arms on Instagram. I post about rugby league all the time. Reach out, ask them a question, reach out to your Super League club, and if they don't have a team, they'll point you on that does, because there's teams. Basically, the rugby league is the M62 straight across the north of England. And if you're in that heartland, there is a team near you. Like, it might not be the team that you follow, but there is one. And, you know, we're hoping to try and sort of jump that chasm and get some involvement from some teams down south and things as we grow and get, because like I said, it is such a powerful force, and especially you don't get many team sports that are designed from their core to be for disabled people. Like, there's little tweaks here and there, whereas this has been from its inception in Australia. The guy sat down and spent a long time. I've met the guy that sort of came up with it, who was across with Australia at the World Cup, and he put a lot of thought. And every year we tweak it again to make it a little bit better of a game to play, a little bit better of a game to watch. Like, as different players with different disabilities come in, your rules get tweaked and things like that. So it is constantly evolving as well, which is exciting to be part of.
And you mentioned a few minutes ago there are 3 new teams in the UK. So is there a domestic league at the moment, and how many?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we've had a league going for 3 years, I think, 3 seasons. COVID messed about with it a bit. But that was one of the big differences between England and the other nations. We have a PDRL league. Although PDRL started in Australia, they don't have a fully functioning league on the go. They just have a couple of teams that meet up occasionally. Whereas, yeah, we have a league. There's a grand finals day. It's a big old trophy that I'm very much hoping to get my hand on come the end of this season. And so the 3 new teams were Hull KR, Hull FC, and Salford. So Salford actually started last season, but really struggled to get enough players and combined with Bradford. So they had like sort of a dual registration sort of thing going on last year where they played together. But now there's Leeds, there's Wakefield, there's Castleford. I mean, you could call me biased, but I think they're the best team. We've got Wigan, Warrington. Where else? Hull. I think I name them all there. Yeah. So that's all of them. And we're hoping for there to be more next year. So like Warrington one year did manage to put 2 teams out, but then didn't quite have the numbers to carry that on. So there's always like if we got enough down, Castleford will put 2 teams out. It's just there is no limit to how many players we can have, and there's all kinds of plans for younger players to get involved, which younger players can come and play, and they just play non-contact. So that you've had parents playing with their kids, and which is great to see. And it's about now trying to make the sport a long-term thing. So getting kids in at 8, 10, 14, starting to play, and then that's something the governing body are looking to push and start setting up kids teams and have. Because if the teams can't put out enough players, we have sort of development games at the festivals because all the teams are there. We'll all lend a couple of players and go and play, maybe not a full place to get some new people to the sport to get a bit of game time and help them sharpen, because you don't need to have played rugby for 10 years and have been this whiz that's maybe just lost a finger and come down. Like if you've never played rugby league, come, and there's the coaches of all the teams are great, and they'll slowly build you, and you can get exposed to the competitive bits of the game at appropriate levels. Like you're not going to get thrown in to playing against the England team straight away where the strongest and best players are. There are different levels within it to welcome everyone, and it is very consciously done that way to make sure that just because you've got a very serious disability doesn't mean it's not for you. There are places to come and play.
And you've already obviously achieved a lot in the sport, having won a World Cup. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. But what are your ambitions for your rugby career going forward, both on an individual basis and with England and Castleford?
So I'd be absolutely lying if I said I didn't want to lift some more silverware with Castleford and with England, which last year we had a really good season at Castleford and just didn't finish quite as strongly as we wanted to. But we've been working hard on that, so hopefully we should have a cracking season. We had a 9-game winning streak last year, so we're hoping to build on that. With England, sort of I'm the lead try scorer, so building on that, keeping scoring tries. Like I'm the lad lucky enough on the wing that the guys do all the hard work, and then I get the chance to dot it down. So it's keeping going with that. And we're not in a squad anymore. We're the team sheet is blank, so it's about proving your place again and getting back in there, proving you can do something that the team needs and that you fit with it and you're there. But those sort of goals aside, because like I said earlier, the silverware is phenomenal. Yeah, so I'm competitive. I want to win things, but it's the goal for me still. The biggest goal is participation and is looking back in 5 years and being every Super League team has a PDRL team. Some of the Championship teams have a PDRL team. The England has an England team, and there may be like a Knights team of like reserves. Like moving it forward and making it the elite sport that it should be. And because one of the big issues is going to be when Australia come back. So they had no support from their governing body previously, and when they took a few beatings when they came across, their governing body is now taken under their wing, and rugby league in Australia is absolutely massive. So now they've done that, and they're going to be sort of publicising it wider, because there'll be plenty of players that play in community games that are really sharp, really strong players. So when they come back, or if we go to them for the next World Cup, their team is going to be unrecognisable. It's going to be such a strong team. It's untrue. And it's making sure that we progress our game. And, the likes of me and the other lads in the squad can train as hard as we want. But the only way we're going to compete is bringing new blood in as well. Because when you get like where I said I got even more competitive when I thought I was losing my dream. If we do get a load of 20-year-olds in now, as much as I think I train hard now, I'm sure that could spur me on some more. And you know, when you're around other players that are, you push each other like the England squad do when you get to that level as much as your teammates. You're all looking for the shirt and stuff as well and wanting to do your bit for the team. So it just drives you that little bit further to do that little bit more. So it's about improvement for the sport and getting it on the coverage that it deserves and the all to get the player numbers. That's my really key thing is people getting out there loving and playing the sport.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. You know, your passion for the game and just for life in general, you know, really comes across. It's I've really enjoyed talking to you and learning about your story. So, you know, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and sharing that with us. You know, congratulations on winning the World Cup. You know, an incredible achievement, and I look forward to following your career and seeing what you achieve in the next few years. You know, as you mentioned earlier, you are on Instagram. I've seen some of your reels that you post and always entertaining. So do for anyone listening, do make sure that you follow Nick on Instagram, and please keep in touch with us. And it'd be great to catch up with you again at some point in the future to see how everything's going.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate getting the word out. So yeah, cheers.
No worries. Thank you very much, Nick.